Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master. And as of me recording this, it's Saturday night, and we just got done playing the game. Uh, I don't normally run the game on Saturdays. We normally play on Sunday. We usually get together around 1 or 2 in the afternoon. We play for about 4 hours typically. Um, but today, earlier in like the middle of the afternoon, Brad called and said, hey, if we play tomorrow, like on game day, I'm actually only available for about an hour. But if you can run the game tonight, I can play for longer than that. And the thing is, this week I had like no free time at all. I was way busier this week than I usually am. Normally, I like to work on a game a little bit kind of every day through the week, and it just didn't happen. And so I had set aside Saturday as my day to finish the adventure and polish it and make sure everything is cool, do all that stuff that a game master does. And I was like in the middle of that process when he called. And the way it had worked out was he basically said, like, I could be there in an hour and a half, and I'm more or less free all night, if you want to do it that way. And so on my end, I look forward to playing every week. And the other thing is, my 50th birthday is coming up. And so I had kind of figured out like I'm going to do this week and I'm going to do that week. And it's all going to um, lead up to it so that I can run the thing for my birthday on the right date, right? And so I didn't want to throw that off either because I thought, man, I don't want this to be a thing where we play a week later, like that's no fun. So I was like, yeah, come on over and I'll just do my best. And so the thing that was the bummer was like in the weeks leading up to this, I had really high hopes for this adventure and there were certain things I wanted to try to do. One of them, I'm just going to tell you guys. I didn't tell my players, but I'm going to tell you guys. At first, when I was trying to brainstorm a Gargoyles thing, because at the end of one of our game sessions, my son mentioned that he was watching Gargoyles like for the first time. I said, yeah, I love Gargoyles. Brad chimed in and he said he really loves Gargoyles. And he's like, if you want to run a game of that, like I'd be very, very, very into that. And I said, cool, man. Like, yeah, we can absolutely do a Gargoyles adventure. Um, well, so then when I went to sort of brainstorm, like, well, what's going to happen in this adventure? I started thinking about how much Gargoyles reminds me of Ninja Turtles in the sense that the protagonists are not human. It's in New York, stuff like that. The opponents have mutants and lasers and robots and you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of shared concepts there. So I thought, you know what I could do is I could take the pilot to the 1987 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. I could kind of run that plot and then you just replace the characters with their counterparts, right? So that was my goal. And if you think about how that cartoon began, April O'Neil is a reporter who is investigating a crime wave where foot soldiers have been stealing these various pieces of scientific gear, right, for their boss, the Shredder. So I thought, well, you know what I'll do is I will say that the boss is David Xanatos, and instead of foot soldiers, it's his security personnel. And they are also stealing these various gadgets, and it's from his rival. That there's another company that does similar stuff to what he does. And I was like, let's, and actually the guy who owns that company is his father-in-law. So I thought, yeah, let's have that be the company being robbed. And it's essentially the same thing. And then instead of April, of course, it's Elise Maza, and she is also kind of doing detective work. And then, in the cartoon, what happens is April gets attacked in a subway. And I think the reason why she gets it, or maybe it's a sewer. Yeah, either way, she gets attacked underground. But I felt like the reason for that was because it is in close proximity to the turtle lair, right? That it's within the area that they would be patrolling. And so I thought in the case of the gargoyles, you don't put it in a sewer or something, right? Put it on a rooftop. And so that was kind of the opening scene is the player characters. By the way, my wife played Friction. My son played Powerhouse 2, and Brad played Vortex. And Vortex has dimension travel, and he has the warp power and teleportation and a lot of stuff like that. So he had opened this warp portal that is how they travel from dimension to dimension. So they come out of that, in an alleyway. They go out onto the street wearing civilian clothing. They find a newspaper vendor. They read what the date is, and they see that it's 1995. And then they're reading the story, and it's the adventure hook of this scientific firm has been broken into, and the following pieces of equipment have been stolen, and blah blah blah. So the the thing they figure out is that this company has you know X number of buildings in New York City, and all but one has already been hit. So it was pretty easy for them to figure out, like, well, we should go to the one that hasn't been hit yet. Maybe that'll get hit tonight. And so when they go there to check it out, Powerhouse flies up and he lands on the roof. Friction has matter surfing where she can kind of run on air, and she leaves like DeLorean fire trails behind her. So she goes up there, and Vortex teleports up there. And while they're up there, they run into Eliza Maza, who's investigating this too. And so she's freaked out by them because they're superheroes, and she's not really used to the whole spandex and, mutant powers and, stuff like that for the most part. And I mean, they have the mutates and gargoyles, like Eliza's brother got turned into more or less like a Black Panther guy, well, where he's like an anthropomorphic animal person. And then he had bat wings and stuff. So like that's not the kind of powers I mean. I'm talking more about like super speed and telepathy and stuff like that. So so she's kind of weirded out by him. She like pulls her gun. She's like, "Who are you guys? Why are you here?" Yada yada yada. And while they're talking, then the bad guys show up and a fight breaks out. And the bad guys are the security guys that work for David Xanatos. I describe them exactly like they appear on the cartoon, where they've got kind of like a blue outfit with like silver metal bits on it, and like kind of a red helmet with a red visor. Um, so these guys show up and they have laser pistols. Everybody's fighting. And the thing that happens that really kind of threw me for a loop is Vortex. I guess he's looking at their armor and he's like, well, I want to magnetize the metal door frame here on there's a door that goes into a stairwell that goes down into the building from the roof. And so he wants that to become magnetic and try to like he wanted to attract their armor to it. And so like for instance, we ran this in DC Heroes, but the concept still is relevant. In GURPS, they have this thing where when you're making like body of metal for a character, you choose whether or not it is ferrous and whether or not it is actually affected by magnetism, right? And so I guess I had to decide whether their armor was or was not. And I decided sort of based on because I just binged the cartoon, right? And there's a lot of lightning in this cartoon, by the way. And I think the gargoyles probably have a slight weakness to electrical attacks. I don't feel like Xanatos's security forces do, though. So I opted that it was non-ferrous, right? And I'm like, no, it's like not affected by it. Certain metals like aluminum and whatever, just magnets don't work. So that was how I treated it. But then we started thinking about all the other stuff in the scene that did apply. And so Friction had various gadgets from the previous game sessions that was kind of like loot that she'd been picking up. And we decided that stuff like went over and stuck to the doorway. And at one point we realized that Powerhouse himself, who has body of metal, um, he is attracted to magnets or whatever. So he flies over and smacks it. And when he ends up pinning one of these security guys to like the door, and he had said he was like flying a little bit off the ground. So we realized that where he was at in terms of height, when he slams into this other guy, it would have looked really bad for kind of like the position they were in. And so like everybody starts laughing. Everybody's got like tears in their eyes, like imagining this situation. Um, and it I don't know how else to put it, but like sometimes moments like that, I think the players become kind of like rowdy, and it's sort of hard to get them to like come down from that. And like if you're trying to really get into like story mode, sometimes that thwarts that from happening, at least at my game table. And that was kind of the case, was they were now kind of not as into story. I think they were more into like let's just sort of tell dirty jokes. Let's do weird stuff that's maybe kind of out of character. Um it was a lot of stuff like that. And so that kind of bummed me out. Um but the point is the gargoyles show up, and that because Eliza's in trouble, and so of course they have a knack to come to her rescue. So they help the player characters beat these bad guys. They end up taking them back to the clock tower. And this was kind of the next moment that I was kind of bummed with how it was working out. Was aside from the fact that now a bunch of the gear I gave the party for a reason has been destroyed by the magnet thing, right? Like there was a gadget that tells them what dimension there's in. There was kind of a codex of the various other dimensions in the multiverse that I was wanting them to learn about it. Now that's destroyed. Um, at any rate, so one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to pair everybody up with the person that would be like their counterpart. So, for instance, because my wife is playing a gadgeteer, I wanted her to sort of realize one of the gargoyles is a gadgeteer named Lexington, and I wanted those two to spend time together. Or like my son's character is the team leader, but he's also got kind of an anger thing going on. And honestly, after binging Gargoyles, Goliath is not only the leader of the Gargoyles, but he also has anger problems. He roars a lot. He's willing to drop bad guys off of a building, and do stuff that a lot of other cartoon characters don't really do. So, and I'm not complaining. I think that was part of the draw of Gargoyles, actually. Um, I like Goliath a lot, but all I'm saying is the two characters have stuff in common. So I was wanting to do this thing where they're finding kindred spirits in each other, and that didn't really pan out. And then like the one guy is um I'm drawing a blank on his name suddenly. Brooklyn, I think it is. He's a gargoyle that has like red skin and kind of like a long beak. He's kind of a hothead. I thought that he and Vortex would see each other as kindred spirits and stuff like that. That never materialized at all. Uh, Tomorrow, my daughter was going to come over and play. And because we played today, that means that her character, Water Bear, was not in the adventure at all. And Water Bear's kindred spirit was going to be Broadway, who is like the fat gargoyle, right? Um, so a lot was lost there, and that it was going to be very personality driven. And so that was just like sucking the wind out of my sails, right? And so the next part of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pilot that I was attempting to emulate is Baxter Stockman and the Mousers. And so in Gargoyles, they have this guy named Dr. Anton Severius, and he used to work for this other company that I mentioned, the company getting robbed. And he was a robotics expert who then does genetics stuff later, right? And this company had invented these like small, I guess you'd call it a drone. It's like a small flying robot. It's not shaped like a person at all. And they have lasers mounted on them. And so I had decided that would be my version of the Mousers from Ninja Turtles. And then this guy was going to kind of be my Baxter Stockman. And so I wanted the Mousers part of the adventure to take more time, be more of a problem, so on and so forth. And like I said earlier, when I plan out an adventure, I kind of look through it like I I I work on it like on an earlier day and I take a little time off and then I read the adventure and I think about it as I go as if I was the player, like what would I do? And then I'm like troubleshooting if I had kind of a brain fart and I overlooked some obvious problem, right? So I had not gotten to that point at all. And the obvious problem that I had overlooked was that Vortex has electrical stuff, including electrical control. And he can dampen a device and kind of keep the electricity from flowing through it so the thing just kind of dies out. Or he can do a thing called surge, where he can overload it with way too much stuff, far too much current, more than it was designed to handle, and it burns out, right? So he ends up doing this to all of our Mouser analogs. And it's at that point, I'm like, oh God, like that's the adventure, right? Like it's ruined now. And I wasn't really sure what to do with it. And and I noticed too that on Brad's end, I'm trying to think how I want to put this. I think the way Brad looks at it is like if he has defeated the thing, he he has like a look on his face, kind of like this is going really well. Is sort of, you know what I mean? Like that was kind of my read on the moment, which is like on my end, I'm going, oh, this is going really, really badly because instead of that being a challenge for them to overcome, it's this super easy, oh, I just kill the Mousers, kind of moment. And I was like, oh no. So and then I was thinking about, well, what are the villains doing? And so Xanatos is there and he's very calm, but he's being a little sarcastic and he's telling the mad scientist guy basically, I didn't pay you for shoddy craftsmanship. Like you're being paid far too well for these things to just kind of break like this, right? And the other guy's like, I don't understand what's going on. I, I don't know. Maybe, when we were stealing these parts from this other company, maybe they put some kind of a fail safe into the parts that I hadn't detected. And Xanatos is like, then take them apart and figure it out. And and so I'm thinking at this point that Vortex is going to get away scot-free. That he can turn invisible, he can walk through walls. He's done all this stuff where they don't even know he's infiltrated their building and is doing this. And when I was watching the show, I paid attention and they still use security cameras and they still have people watching cameras, right? So I don't think it's like they have some kind of really advanced sensors in the building that have like the life sense power or something like that. You know what I mean? I think they still need like a warm body in a chair watching a computer monitor for intruders. So invisibility, I think, means that nobody knows he's there. At any rate, so I'm like, oh crap. And then the moment, and I feel like everybody at the table reacted to this, was then Brad says basically, cool, now that I've taken out all the Mousers, I want to take out power to the building. And like, I want to kill the lights that are in this room. And everybody kind of looked at each other like, oh, this is where this changes. Right. And so I'm like, okay, roll the dice. And he does. And he gets a good roll. And I'm like, okay, you kill the power and backup emergency power comes on and it's all red lights. And this sets off a security system so that now, like over the windows and doors and stuff, these metal plates lower. And like everybody else in the party is alarmed by this. And so this begins this escalation thing. And so I go through the party and I say, what's everybody doing? And Friction runs up to the outside. And by the way, this is the castle on top of a skyscraper. So she runs up onto like the castle to like a big open part of it. And there are laser guns that target her. So she gets on one of them and she's trying to figure out like, can I take this thing apart at super speed? Can I sabotage it with fire? Like will the buttons and stuff melt if I shoot it with fire? She's trying to figure that out. And she actually gets a low roll to figure out how the gadget works, which is kind of weird because she's very smart. And so that ends up being kind of a testament to just how high tech um, this guy's stuff is, right? Xanatos, his gear is actually pretty top notch. And then Powerhouse also, flies up and he's wanting to enter the building and he has to sort of do a slam attack against one of these metal things that covered a door. He gets what he needs, so he takes this metal plate kind of off of its track that it was on, And he busts into the room, and Xanatos tries to run to get to where his power armor is so he can put that on. And Vortex teleports Xanatos back to where he started. He's got like line of sight on him. And so he puts him back in the middle of the room again. Uh the mad scientist ends up getting shot by lightning and knocked out. Xanatos, it comes around to his turn again, and so he calls Owen. And he all he says is, "Owen, I'm in distress." And Owen is like his right-hand man. And the big secret spoilers, by the way, if anybody has not watched Gargoyles, this is a huge spoiler, so turn off the video now. I don't want to ruin the experience for you. But for everybody who's still here, Owen is secretly Puck, right? As in, Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. And like I said, I just watched the show. After the game, my son and I kind of discussed this part of it where he and I have different takes on Huck's motivation. And he kind of made a decision, and like what I think it means and what my son thinks it means are very different things. But I think that Xanatos amuses Puck. So Puck chooses to pretend to be Owen, who is kind of like this nerdy guy who seems very, very mundane. Whereas Puck is a trickster, and he's very humor oriented, and he's like high energy. He seems in a lot of ways like the polar opposite of what his alter ego is, right? But my read on the situation was that he can really turn into Puck whenever he wants, and he just chooses not to. And that, how do I want to put this? Like, if he lets the good guys beat Xanatos, Xanatos no longer entertains him. So that would ruin his fun. So once Xanatos is knocked out, I think Puck would show himself and attack the thing that is threatening his amusement, which is the heroes, right? Um, my son's interpretation of that, by the way, is sort of like Puck um, is, I don't know how I want to sum it up in a nutshell, has this situation he's come up with a rule for himself that my son thinks he would not break and would not interfere, and stuff like that. And I said, well, at the end of the day, it's a multiverse story, right? So this is not the Gargoyles Earth, it is a Gargoyles Earth. So even if the Puck would maybe not do this, this is an Elseworlds, right? So this Puck would, and everybody kind of agreed to that logic. But so yeah, I had him reveal that he's Puck, and I gave him the sorcery power. So then he can, in DC Heroes, you can substitute sorcery for any other power in the book. So he subs it for the detect power to figure out where Vortex is. He figures out Vortex is the one doing some of this stuff. He subs it for Spirit Blast so that he can attack Vortex's spirit attribute. Because all of the members of the party have physical powers that protect them versus physical attacks, right? None of them have anything to protect against anything that hurts your mind or your spirit. And since he's a mystical guy and spirit is considered a mystical attribute, I'm like, well, that's what we'll attack then. And I wanted him to seem dangerous. I feel like he for sure should, you know. Um So he ends up blasting the spirit of Vortex and he knocks him out in one hit. He takes Vortex down from a spirit of 13. He did enough damage. He could have taken him down to a -1, but I said it'll be knockout damage only. And the reason I did that, because like right before that moment, actually, I was so worried this was going to be a total party kill. And that would really suck because of who these characters are. These are the children of what I often feel are the most important characters in the history of the game. And for these guys to be involved in a total party kill would really, really suck, right? But I also want to run the villains in a way I feel like this is really what they would do, right? I don't want to compromise that. So I'm kind of sweating it. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, am I going to kill off these like super important characters? And I feel like because my wife and my son know the history of the game so well and they know me so well and all that, I think they both realize how incredibly close they are to this bad thing happening. So my son, um, honestly, in kind of a stroke of genius, he starts talking to Puck. And he was so careful with how he worded things because he knew if I made him roll his charisma skill versus what Puck's attributes are, he knew Puck's attributes were way higher than anything he had on his own character sheet. So and I don't think I can do it justice now in terms of the wording, but he was like, all he would do is state facts that put Puck in a situation where Puck had to decide what he was doing or how he felt about a situation or whatever, right? Oh, and I left a part out. This part is important too, which is so there's the friction of Earth K, who's in her 40s because she time traveled. If you're familiar with the X-Men comics and Cable, Cable is like the son of Cyclops, but sometimes they're running around and they seem like they're maybe about the same age because of time travel, right? Well, so Friction did the exact same thing with her dad, where she went back, kind of Marty McFly style, where Marty's hanging out with George McFly and they're both 17 or 18 years old at the time, right? Friction did the same thing with her dad. And so on Earth K, she did, I mean. So as a result, she's in her 40s. But the friction of Earth L never did that, and she's in her 20s. So the friction of Earth K married a King Arthur from Earth K, right? Um, the friction of Earth L did not. And because the gadgets got broken in the magnetic doorway at the beginning of the game, the friction of Earth L um, goes through a bar door to the Continuum Bar and Grill, and she goes to the bartender who was Oberon and tells him, basically my gear got messed up. I don't suppose you have extra stuff laying around. And he took her out back to this thing he calls the tool shed. And what it is it looks like a tool shed from the outside, but the doorway into it is a dimensional doorway. And so when you go into it, the inside is kind of just an empty metal room with a second dimensional doorway there. And so when you go through that basically this thing is this huge expansive complex with a lot of rooms, but each room is its own dimension. And the doors are just dimensional doorways taking you from dimension to dimension, right? The point, though, is that she had just been in the presence of Oberon, the Oberon of Earth K. And then she returned to the Gargoyles world. So now, when there's this big showdown with Puck, Puck senses at one point he says like every energy in the universe leaves residue, basically. And you like you basically I can smell Oberon on you is kind of the gist, right? So that is interesting to Puck. And one of the things Puck is thinking is he doesn't understand how these people know Oberon. First of all, it's unclear if Puck knew if it was his own Oberon from his universe or not. But the fact they know a Oberon, he doesn't know how they know him. He's a little worried about retaliation, right? So like that's a thing in his mind. He's not made up his mind yet, but it's something he's sort of considering. And um so when my son starts to say stuff like, "You know what? I don't even want to be here." And like he was my son legit earlier in the adventure, like when he got stuck to the door frame, he was saying how annoying that was and so on and so forth. So out of game, my son's been kind of complaining through the whole adventure about his teammates. And so now we get to this part of it, and he's like, you know what? I don't even want to be here. Uh, I am totally cool with leaving. Like the Mousers got destroyed. That's all we cared about. He's like, I didn't come here to fight Xanatos. I came here to fight that mad scientist that and it's already been done. I'm done here. I am totally cool with leaving you alone, leaving Xanatos alone, um, so on and so forth. And I really wish that we would have recorded the game itself. My son took his time, thought it through, and he found this way of saying stuff without ever having to roll. And like I said, that whole time then Oberon, excuse me, Puck is still sensing that Oberon stuff. He kind of mentions that he can sense it. And so he says something to Friction about Oberon, and she said, I literally just left his side, I think is how she words it. And so he doesn't want to make Oberon mad. He really only cares that Xanatos kind of survives so that he can keep entertaining him. Um, so he lets him go. And so Powerhouse throws Vortex over his shoulder. They go back to the clock tower. Puck turns back into Owen. Xanatos wakes up. We really don't see anything from the villains after that. The heroes go to the clock tower. They kind of tell the gargoyles, we killed the mousers for you, whatever. We fried these machines that were a problem. The gargoyles are grateful. They also taught the gargoyles how to use the bar door of the CB&G. So now, anytime the gargoyles want to go to the Continuum Bar and Grill, they have that ability now, which I also thought was interesting because I would like to go back to this world and do it justice. Because, like I said, this adventure just didn't go like I wanted it to go. Um, and then I was telling Brad that then when Vortex wakes up at the clock tower, I said, you only have one AP of spirit. 0 means you're asleep. So one is you're awake. I was like, look in the book when it describes one AP of spirit. look at what it implies, where it's not just your resilience against magical damage, it is also kind of like depression and stuff like that. So he thought that was really interesting, and he seemed moved by that in a way. He's like, "Oh wow, like my guy is like such a low point," and I don't think he'd thought about that aspect of the personality yet, you know? Um, so it's like, okay, so they take him back to the Continuum Bar and Grill. They ask the bartender, who is the Oberon of Earth K, um, if the Continuum Bar and Grill has anything that helps with spirit. And so he did. He had this thing that was a drink behind the bar, and the bottle, I described it as looking a little bit like when you get honey from the grocery store and it comes in that little container that's shaped kind of like a teddy bear. This bottle of spirits is shaped kind of like a teddy bear. And I described the glass of the bottle as kind of like, um, how do I want to put this? Like when you're walking through a parking lot and you see like a little puddle of oil, but then it's like reflecting the colors of the rainbow in it. You know what I mean? I said that's kind of what the glass looked like. And then when they were pouring liquid out of it, that it was sort of like the color of cotton candy. It's like pinks and blues and stuff. And as they're pouring it into the glass, it was kind of like smoking. And that smoke was also kind of that cotton candy colored smoke. And I said, but it smells very, very, very sweet. You know, it smells like a candy factory or something. So then he drank it and it refilled his spirit. And it made him feel very, very good. But then, and this is, by the way, this is a drink from another role-playing game called Tales from the Floating Vagabond. And so the side effect is then when you go to talk, you kind of sound like you've been sucking air out of a helium balloon. Like it makes your voice high pitched. I don't know. It's something from that game. We always thought it was kind of fuzzy. So, or excuse me, we always thought it was kind of funny. So we had made reference to it a long time ago in some old games I ran. So it's kind of a throwback. My wife got a kick out of that stuff getting mentioned again. Brad got a kick out of experiencing it for the first time. I mean, at least it seemed that way. Um, but yeah, then that ended up being um that was it for this adventure. And then afterwards we talked about the adventure. I asked those guys how they felt about it. They said they loved it, that they were laughing a lot and stuff. Um, so I'm glad they had fun, you know. It sure wasn't what I had set out to do, you know. And then there was the entire rest of the pilot of Turtles. My thing where I was going with it was I was going to say, because in Ninja Turtles, of course, Shredder has made contact with this being from another realm called Krang. And Krang is a disembodied brain who wants a robot body built for him, right? Well, where all that was going was I was going to have the mad scientist who, like I said, he gets into genetics. I was going to do a kind of a Baxter Stockman thing where he was going to try to create a clone body using DNA from one or more of the heroes. And the idea was that the being Xanatos has been in contact with is Chernabog. And he is a being from another realm. And he was going to sort of lead Xanatos to believe he's an alien. And he was part of the reasons they were stealing components from this other scientific company was to build a dimensional gateway, right? And I wanted to try to lead the players to think, oh yeah, it's like kind of the Krang thing. If it's like a doorway to Dimension X, kind of an idea, and yada yada yada. But then the big twist was going to be it's not a door to Dimension X, right? It's like a door to hell. And when he says, I have all these minions on the other side of the door that are going to come through and help Xanatos take over the world, that is not what's going on at all, right? And I thought that was very much in the spirit of Gargoyles, where you're mixing, you've got the swords and sorcery stuff, but then there's like a tech component to it. I was wanting to go there and we didn't do it yet. Like I said, the characters have the ability to visit each other now. If we want to revisit it, we can. So we'll see if that happens, I guess. But yeah, that was it. We just had quit playing pretty much right before I started recording this video. So I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm kind of losing my voice now. Um, but like I said, my players enjoyed playing this. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing about it. If so, as always, it would help out the channel a lot if you were to hit like, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. And from all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.